Headlights sliced through the darkness on the dirt road, winding toward the Morgan Ranch at 11:30 on a Wednesday night. Allison, wearing faded yellow pajamas with her auburn hair pulled into a careless bun, had just finished locking the barn when a sleek black SUV and a Ducati motorcycle rolled to a stop near her fence line. Her pulse hammered in her chest. Her boots kicked up dust as she rushed to the porch, fingers wrapping around her father's hunting rifle mounted beside the door. Nobody drove out here this late, not unless they were Vance's people. 3 months ago, the slick land developer had started his campaign of intimidation. Phone calls at 2 a.m., survey stakes driven into her land without permission, a legal notice threatening eminent domain taped to her mailbox. He wanted her ancestral property for a luxury development, and he'd made it clear he wasn't the patient type. Allison had learned to sleep light. She'd learned to keep the rifle loaded, but tonight felt different. A car door opened with a soft click. A man stepped out wearing a tailored gray suit that probably cost more than her monthly mortgage, not one of Vance's cheap muscle. This man moved with the kind of authority that would make Vance himself nervous. Even from a distance, Allison could see the exhaustion carved into his features. Dark hair swept back from a sharp face, cold blue eyes that had seen too much. And there, visible when the porch light caught him at the right angle, a dragon tattoo coiling up his neck, its tail disappearing beneath his collar. The mark of someone who'd survived wars most people only whispered about. He walked toward her porch with measured, deliberate steps. "Allison Morgan?" His voice was low and commanding, the tone of a man who expected answers, not questions. Allison raised the rifle to her shoulder, barrel aimed square at his chest. "Who's asking? This is private property." He didn't flinch, didn't even glance at the weapon. "The safety's still on. I can see it from here." Heat flooded Allison's face, but she didn't lower the gun. "I'm not in the habit of entertaining midnight visitors. State your business or get back in that fancy car." He stopped at the bottom porch step. For the first time, Allison saw something flicker in those icy eyes that gave her pause. Urgency. Raw, unfiltered urgency. Not the swagger of a criminal, but the desperation of a drowning man reaching for anything that might keep him afloat. "I'm here to make you an offer," he said. "Near midnight. 2 vehicles. A man in a $1,000 suit with a dragon wrapped around his throat." Allison's finger moved closer to the trigger. "What kind of offer?" "Marry me." He checked his watch with the casual efficiency of someone running out of time. "Before noon tomorrow." Allison's grip on the rifle faltered. "What did you just say?" "I need a wife. There are 12 hours and 17 minutes left." He pulled a phone from his inner pocket and held it toward her, screen glowing with what looked like an official document. "The high table gave me an ultimatum 3 weeks ago. Present a wife to prove I'm stable leadership material, or they hand my territory to Silas, my second in command, the man who wants me dead. And what does any of that have to do with me? Silas is the one financing Vance." The world seemed to tilt beneath Allison's boots. The rifle sagged in her hands. You know about Vance." "I know everything." The man's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped half an octave. "The debt restructuring he's forcing on you, the false building code violations he's been filing, the accelerated foreclosure notice you're getting served with in 72 hours, the dead coyote he left on your fence post last Tuesday." He climbed one step, those piercing eyes locked on hers. "If I lose tomorrow, Silas takes control of the Barnes syndicate, and Vance will have unlimited resources to crush you into dust. Your family's ranch will be a parking lot by spring. But if you win?" Allison's voice came out steadier than she felt. Lucas Barnes pulled a folded contract from his jacket pocket. "If I win, your debt disappears. Vance leaves Texas. And you keep your land." He paused, the dragon on his neck flexing as he swallowed. "But there's one condition you need to hear before you even think about saying yes." "What condition?" "If you sign this, you become a target. Every enemy I've made, and darling, I've made a lot of them, will see you as leverage. You'll have a bullseye on your back the size of this ranch." He took another step up, close enough now that she could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "So I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. This isn't a fairy tale. This is survival." The porch light buzzed above them. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. Allison's phone chose that exact moment to vibrate in her pajama pocket. She didn't need to look to know what it was. Another threatening message from Vance. Another countdown to losing everything her parents had built. She lowered the rifle completely and met the stranger's gaze without blinking. "I have a condition of my own." Lucas Barnes raised one eyebrow. "I'm listening." You want me to play the part of your wife to satisfy some criminal board of directors? Fine. I'll do it. Allison stepped forward until they were nearly toe-to-toe. But you don't get to do this from your penthouse with your bodyguards and your designer suits. If I'm risking my neck, you're living here. On this ranch. Without your security detail, without your weapons, without any of that criminal empire nonsense. For the first time since he'd arrived, something like surprise crossed his features. You want me to what? You heard me. You live here, by my rules, doing real work. If you want the high table to believe we're actually married, then you're going to have to survive my world. She crossed her arms. Can the big bad crime boss handle a little manual labor? Or are those hands only good for signing death warrants? Lucas Barnes stared at her for 3 full seconds. Then, to her absolute shock, a ghost of a smile touched the corner of his mouth. The first crack in that stone-cold exterior. He extended his hand. You've got yourself a deal, Mrs. Barnes. Allison looked at his outstretched hand, at the tattoos peeking out from his cuff, at the dangerous glint in his eyes that promised this was either going to save her or destroy everything she'd ever known. She shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and sent an unexpected jolt straight through her. I'm not Mrs. Anything yet, she said. And if you think I'm going easy on you just because you're paying off my debts, you're in for a rude awakening. Good. Lucas released her hand but held her gaze. I don't want easy. I want real. He turned and gestured to someone waiting in the SUV. A woman in a black suit emerged carrying a briefcase. This is my attorney, Victoria. She'll handle the paperwork. We leave for the chapel in 1 hour. Allison's heart hammered against her ribs. 1 hour? Tick-tock, darling? Lucas checked his watch again. We're burning moonlight. As Victoria climbed the porch steps with the marriage contract, Allison caught her reflection in the darkened window. Yellow pajamas, messy hair, a hunting rifle in one hand, and her entire future hanging in the balance. Somewhere behind her, the ranch house her great-grandfather had built stood silent and waiting. Somewhere ahead, a life she'd never imagined was barreling toward her at 100 miles an hour. She took a deep breath and reached for the pen. The chapel sat on the edge of town like a forgotten relic. Its neon sign flickering, "We never close," in pink and white letters that had seen better decades. Allison pressed her forehead against the cold window of the SUV, watching the empty streets blur past. She'd changed into jeans and a simple white blouse, the closest thing to wedding attire she owned. In her lap sat the contract Victoria had made her sign, the ink still drying on her commitment to insanity. Lucas sat beside her in silence, his jaw tight, fingers drumming an agitated rhythm against his knee. The dragon on his neck seemed to pulse in the passing streetlights. Every few minutes, he'd check his phone, watching the minutes tick away like a man watching a fuse burn down. Having second thoughts? Allison asked, breaking the suffocating quiet. No. His answer came too quickly. You? She should say yes. She should demand he turn this car around and take his dangerous offer back to whatever hole he'd crawled out of. Instead, she thought about the foreclosure notice, about Vance's smug face, about her parents' graves at the edge of the property, and how she'd promised them she'd never let strangers take what they'd built. No, she said. The SUV pulled into the chapel parking lot at 12:47 a.m. A single other car sat in the lot, a beat-up sedan that probably belonged to whoever was desperate enough to work the graveyard shift at a wedding chapel. Lucas's bodyguard, a mountain of a man named Dominic who'd been driving, killed the engine and turned to face them. Boss, I still think this is a mistake. Let me make some calls. We can find another. No. Lucas's voice cut like a blade. We do this now. With her. That's final. Dominic's eyes flicked to Allison with something that might have been pity. She met his gaze without flinching. She'd seen worse than judgment from a hired gun. They walked through the chapel doors into a space that smelled like artificial flowers and broken dreams. The carpet was a faded burgundy, worn thin in paths that led to an altar decorated with plastic roses. A man in his 60s sat behind a desk, reading a paperback western and looking thoroughly unsurprised to see them. Marriage? He asked, not looking up. Marriage, Lucas confirmed. $200, cash only. Need 2 witnesses and valid IDs. Lucas pulled a money clip from his pocket and peeled off bills without counting. We have 1 witness. You'll be the second. The officiant finally looked up, his eyes taking in Lucas's expensive suit, the tattoos, Dominic's obvious bodyguard stance, and Allison's white-knuckled grip on her purse. To his credit, he didn't ask questions. He'd probably seen stranger things at this hour. Follow me. The ceremony space was barely large enough for the 4 of them. An archway wrapped in fake ivy stood against a wall papered with clouds and cherubs that might have been romantic 40 years ago. Now it just looked sad. Allison felt her throat tighten. This wasn't how she'd imagined getting married. There were supposed to be wildflowers and her best friend from high school and maybe a band playing something her mother used to love. Lucas seemed to sense her hesitation. His hand found the small of her back, warm through the thin fabric of her blouse. "We can still walk away," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "I'll find another solution." She turned to look at him. Really look at him. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes, the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders. Whatever war he was fighting, he'd been fighting it alone for a long time. "Let's get this over with," she said. The officiant launched into a ceremony that sounded like he'd performed it 10,000 times, words sliding together in a monotone that stripped away any romance. "Do you take this woman? Do you take this man? In sickness and health, for richer or poorer?" The phrases echoed in the small room like a judge reading a sentence. When they got to the vows, Lucas turned to face her fully. His hands, surprisingly gentle, took hers. She could feel calluses on his palms that didn't match the expensive suit, old scars that told stories he'd probably never share. "I promise," he said, his voice steady and sure, "to protect you, no matter what comes." It wasn't the traditional vow. It wasn't poetic or sweet. But something in the way he said it made Allison believe him. "I promise," she replied, her own voice stronger than she expected. "Not to shoot you, unless you give me a really good reason." The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. The officiant cleared his throat and produced 2 rings from a drawer, cheap bands that probably came from a bulk order. Lucas slid one onto her finger. It was too loose. She slid the other onto his. It was too tight. Perfect metaphors for whatever this arrangement was. "By the power vested in me by the state of Texas, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Allison's heart stopped. They hadn't discussed this part. Lucas's eyes searched hers, a silent question. She gave the smallest nod, and he leaned in. His lips brushed against hers, warm and brief and entirely too gentle for a man with a dragon tattooed on his throat. It was over in a heartbeat, but Allison felt the impact of it all the way down to her toes. They turned to the witness table. The marriage certificate lay waiting, official and final. Victoria had explained that this document would be filed with the county, registered with the high table, and become a matter of permanent record. There would be no easy way to undo this. Lucas picked up the pen first. He paused, the tip hovering over the signature line. Then he leaned close to Allison, his breath warm against her ear. "Once you sign this, you're a target. Every enemy I've made will see you as my weakness. They'll come for you to get to me. Silas won't stop until one of us is dead." His voice dropped even lower. Last chance to walk away, Allison Morgan. She could feel his tension, wound tight as a spring, waiting for her to run, expecting it, maybe. Instead, she took the pen from his hand, their fingers brushing in the exchange. She pressed the tip to paper and signed her name in clear, decisive strokes. Allison Morgan Barnes. Lucas released a breath he'd been holding and signed his own name beside hers. Lucas Alexander Barnes. Dominic signed as witness, his expression grim. The officiant added his signature with the bored efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. It was done. Allison Morgan had just married the most dangerous man in Texas, and the sun wouldn't rise for another 5 hours. Allison had exactly 4 hours of sleep before Lucas shook her awake in the guest bedroom of her own ranch house. The sun was barely cresting the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and pink that would have been beautiful if she weren't so exhausted. She blinked up at him, momentarily disoriented by the sight of a man in her doorway, before the previous night came crashing back. The chapel, the vows, the cheap ring digging into her finger. "Get up," Lucas said, his voice clipped and urgent. "The high-table video conference is in 45 minutes. You need to look the part." "The part of what? Your sleep-deprived fake wife?" Allison sat up, pushing tangled hair out of her face. "The part of a woman who loves me enough to marry me on a moment's notice." He tossed a garment bag onto the bed. Victoria brought clothes, business casual, hair down. "And for the love of God, smile at me at least once during the call." 30 minutes later, Allison stood in her own kitchen wearing a navy blue blouse she'd never have chosen for herself, her hair brushed into something resembling order, staring at a laptop set up on her dining table. Lucas had transformed the space, angling the camera to show the rustic kitchen behind them, the morning light streaming through the windows, creating the illusion of domestic bliss. He'd even made coffee, the smell filling the small space. "Remember," Lucas said, adjusting his tie in the camera preview, "these people are vipers. They'll look for any weakness, any inconsistency. Silas will try to break you. Don't let him. I've dealt with Vance for 3 months. I can handle some criminals on a video call." Lucas's expression darkened. Vance is a gnat compared to the high table. These are the people who decide who lives and dies in 6 states. They don't threaten, they just eliminate. Before Allison could respond, the laptop chimed. Lucas clicked accept, and suddenly they were staring at a screen divided into 6 boxes. 5 men and 1 woman, all dressed in expensive suits, all wearing expressions that could freeze blood. And there, in the bottom right corner, was Silas. He was younger than Allison expected, maybe 40, with slicked back blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach his cold green eyes. The kind of man who probably practiced that smile in mirrors, perfecting the art of looking charming while planning your murder. "Lucas," the woman spoke first, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. "You've surprised us. We expected you to arrive alone and empty-handed, ready to beg for more time." "I don't beg, Constance." Lucas's hand found Allison's under the table, squeezing once. A reminder or a warning, she couldn't tell. "I present my wife, Allison Barnes. We were married last night." The silence that followed was deafening. 6 pairs of eyes studied her through the camera, with the intensity of scientists examining a new species. Allison forced herself not to squirm, keeping her spine straight and her expression neutral. "How convenient," Silas drawled, leaning back in his chair with theatrical skepticism. "A marriage that materialized in less than 24 hours. Tell me, Mrs. Barnes, what attracted you to Lucas? Was it his winning personality, or his extensive collection of felony charges?" "His honesty," Allison said before Lucas could intervene. "He told me exactly who he was and what he needed. That's more than most men manage on a first date." One of the older men on the screen, someone Lucas hadn't identified, chuckled. Silas's smile tightened. "Fascinating. And where exactly did you 2 lovebirds meet? Let me guess, at a charity gala? A mutual friend's party?" Silas leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Or did Lucas simply purchase you from whatever catalog he found most convenient?" Lucas's grip on her hand turned crushing. Allison could feel the rage radiating off him in waves, but his face remained impassive. She squeezed back, a signal to let her handle this. "We met when he showed up on my property at midnight, looking like death warmed over and desperate enough to propose to a stranger." Allison met Silas's gaze through the camera without blinking. "I said yes because I needed help, and he needed stability. It's not a love story for the romance novels, but it's honest, which is apparently a rare commodity in your world." Another council member, a man with a thick gray beard, actually smiled. "She's got fire, Lucas. I'll give you that." Silas wasn't deterred. "How touching. Tell me, Allison, in your extensive 12-hour marriage, has Lucas shared the details of his business with you? Does he discuss his work over breakfast? Perhaps pillow talk about territory disputes and debt collection?" "He told me enough," Allison said. "I know he runs an organization. I know you people gave him an ultimatum. I know his second-in-command has been undermining him for months." She watched Silas's expression flicker, just for a moment. A crack in that polished armor. "And I know," she continued, her voice dropping to something colder, "that some men think women are just decorative props, tools to be used and thrown away when they're no longer useful. But here's the thing about props. Silas, sometimes they talk back." The bearded man laughed outright this time. Even Constance's severe expression softened into something that might have been approval. Silas's face flushed red, his jaw clenching so hard Allison could see the muscle jumping. "You have no idea what you've walked into, little girl," Silas hissed. "Playing house with Lucas Barnes doesn't make you family. It makes you a liability. And liabilities get eliminated." Lucas started to rise from his chair, but Allison's hand on his arm stopped him. She leaned closer to the camera, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "Is that a threat, Silas?" Because it sounded like a threat, and threatening a council member's wife seems like the kind of thing that might violate some rules. Or does the high table not have rules about that sort of thing? Constance's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. "That's quite enough, Silas. This council doesn't tolerate threats against family members, as you well know." She turned her attention back to Lucas and Allison. "Lucas, you've fulfilled the requirement. Your marriage is recognized by this council. However, we'll be monitoring the situation. Any indication that this is a sham arrangement, and the original ruling stands. Understood, Lucas said, his voice tight. One more thing, the bearded man added, his eyes twinkling with something that might have been mischief. Mrs. Barnes, you're welcome to join future council meetings. It's been a long time since anyone's put Silas in his place so efficiently. We could use more of that energy. The screen went dark. The call ended. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. Then Lucas released a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for the entire 20-minute conversation. That was, he started. Terrifying? Allison offered, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. I was going to say brilliant. Lucas turned to her, and for the first time since they'd met, he smiled. Really smiled. It transformed his entire face, softening the hard edges and making him look years younger. You just made Silas look like a fool in front of the entire council. Do you have any idea what you've done? Probably made things worse. You made him desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. Lucas stood, running a hand through his hair. But he wasn't bluffing about the threat. He's going to come after you now. After us. Allison looked at the cheap ring on her finger, at the man she'd married less than 8 hours ago, at the laptop still sitting on her grandmother's dining table. She thought about Silas's face when she'd called him out, about the way the council had actually listened to her, about how good it had felt to fight back instead of being afraid. Let him come, she said. I didn't back down from Vance, and I'm not backing down from some entitled criminal who thinks women are disposable. Lucas stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then he extended his hand, formal as a business deal. Welcome to the war, Mrs. Barnes. She shook it. Don't call me Mrs. Barnes. It's weird. What should I call you? Allison works fine. Or, the woman who saved your empire, if you're feeling grateful. That smile again, quick and genuine. Don't let it go to your head. We still have to survive the next 30 days without getting killed. Then I guess you better figure out how to feed chickens, husband, because you're about to learn what real work looks like. The black SUV returned at noon with 3 Louis Vuitton suitcases, a garment bag that looked like it cost more than Allison's truck, and Dominic wearing an expression that suggested he was attending a funeral. Lucas stood in the driveway in his gray suit, sweat already beading on his forehead as the Texas sun beat down without mercy. This is everything? Allison asked, eyeing the luggage. I travel light, Lucas said. She laughed, short and sharp. That's 3 months of my clothing budget sitting on my gravel driveway. Come on, let's get you settled before you melt. The guest bedroom was barely big enough for the double bed and a rickety dresser that had belonged to Allison's grandmother. Lucas stood in the doorway, taking in the faded floral wallpaper, the window unit air conditioner that wheezed more than it cooled, and the distinct absence of anything resembling luxury. The bathroom's down the hall, Allison said, fighting back a smile at his expression. You'll share it with me. Try not to use all the hot water. The tank takes forever to reheat. Shared bathroom, Lucas repeated, like she'd just told him he'd be sleeping in the barn. Welcome to ranch life. I'll give you an hour to unpack. Then you're helping with afternoon chores. She left him standing there, surrounded by designer luggage in a room that probably cost less to furnish than one of his suits. 58 minutes later, Lucas emerged wearing what he probably considered casual. Pressed black slacks, a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and Italian leather shoes that had never seen a day of actual work. The dragon tattoo on his neck seemed almost comical paired with the outfit, like someone had photoshopped a crime boss onto a catalog model. You can't be serious, Allison said, looking him up and down. What's wrong with this? You're about to muck out stables in $300 shoes. These are $700, actually. Allison closed her eyes and counted to 5. There's a box of my father's old work clothes in the hall closet. Go change before you ruin everything you own. When Lucas returned in faded jeans that were 2 inches too short and a flannel shirt that strained across his shoulders, Allison had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. He looked like a child playing dress-up, complete with the scowl of someone deeply uncomfortable in his own skin. Not a word, he warned. Wouldn't dream of it. Come on, the horses are waiting. The stable was Allison's favorite place on the property. The smell of hay and leather and the warm animal scent of the horses a comfort she'd known since childhood. She had 4 horses left from the dozen her parents used to keep. Rosie, a gentle mare with a graying muzzle. Bullet, a temperamental gelding who only tolerated Allison. And 2 younger horses, Copper and Daisy, who were currently hanging their heads over their stall doors with interest at the stranger. This is Rosie, Allison said, running her hand along the mare's neck. She's the sweet one. All you have to do is fill her water bucket and give her 2 flakes of hay from that stack there. Lucas approached the stall like he was approaching a wild animal. Rosie, bless her patient soul, just blinked at him with those big dark eyes. She won't bite, Allison assured him. How do you know? Because she's a 20-year-old mare who's never bitten anyone in her life. Now stop being dramatic and open the stall door. What followed was the most entertainment Allison had experienced in months. Lucas, who could apparently face down criminal counsels without flinching, was terrified of a horse that barely came up to his shoulder. He moved through the stall like he was navigating a minefield, keeping maximum distance from Rosie while trying to reach the water bucket. You have to actually get close to her, Allison called from where she was leaning against the stable door. She's not going to walk away from you. She's looking at me. That's what horses do. They have eyes. Lucas managed to fill the water bucket without incident, though he sloshed half of it on his borrowed boots. The hay went slightly better, until he turned around and walked directly into Bullet's stall without checking who was inside first. The gelding, startled and annoyed, shifted his weight and planted one massive hoof directly on Lucas's foot. The sound that came out of Lucas Barnes, head of the Barnes crime syndicate, was somewhere between a yelp and a curse that would have made a sailor blush. He hopped backward, tripped over the water bucket he'd just filled, and landed flat on his back in the hay. Allison couldn't help it. She laughed, really laughed, the kind of deep, genuine laughter that shook her whole body and brought tears to her eyes. She laughed so hard she had to brace herself against the door frame, watching Lucas lie there in the hay, covered in dust and horsehair and indignation. "Are you quite finished?" he asked, his voice ice-cold despite his undignified position. "Not even close," Allison managed between gasps. "Your face when he stepped on you. The beast tried to crush my foot. Bullet weighs 1,200 pounds. If he'd tried to crush your foot, you'd know it. He was just annoyed you walked in without announcing yourself." She offered him a hand up, still grinning. "Rule 1 of ranch life. Horses have right of way. Always." Lucas took her hand, his grip firm even as he pulled himself out of the hay. Up close, with bits of straw caught in his dark hair and dirt smudged across his expensive shirt, he looked almost human, almost approachable. The dangerous crime boss facade had cracked, revealing something softer underneath. "I think your horse hates me," he said. "Bullet hates everyone except me. Don't take it personally." They finished the evening chores in relative peace, though Allison had to demonstrate every task twice before Lucas attempted it himself. Filling water buckets, distributing hay, checking the fence line for damage. Simple work that she'd done thousands of times, now made complicated by a man who'd probably never performed manual labor in his life. By the time they trudged back to the house, the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and red, and Lucas looked like he'd gone 3 rounds in a boxing ring. Sweat plastered his borrowed shirt to his back. Dirt streaked his face. His hands, she noticed, were already developing blisters from the pitchfork. "Shower's yours first," Allison said, taking pity on him. "I'll start dinner." 20 minutes later, Lucas emerged looking almost human again, wearing what had to be his version of loungewear, dark jeans, and a black t-shirt that showed off arms covered in tattoos she hadn't seen before. Intricate designs that wove up from his wrists to disappear under his sleeves, telling stories in ink. He found Allison in the kitchen, opening a can of beans with the kind of efficiency born from practice. "That's dinner?" he asked, watching her dump the contents into a pot. "Unless you want to drive 40 minutes to the nearest restaurant, yeah. We've got bread that's only a day old, and some cheese that should still be good." She glanced at him over her shoulder. "I'm guessing this isn't what you're used to." "I usually have a chef." "Of course you do." Allison set 2 mismatched plates on the small kitchen table, the one that wobbled if you put your elbows on it wrong. "Well, Chef Allison's specialty is whatever doesn't require refrigeration and can be opened with a can opener." They sat across from each other in the fading light, the only sound the scrape of spoons against plates. Lucas ate mechanically, each bite looking like a personal offense to his palate. Allison found herself studying him in the gathering darkness. This strange man who'd invaded her life with his ultimatums and his expensive luggage and his complete inability to function in her world. "This is terrible," Lucas said finally. "Yeah," Allison agreed. "But it's honest terrible. Nobody's pretending these are gourmet beans." Something flickered across his face. Almost a smile. Fair point. They finished eating in silence, the kitchen growing dark around them. Outside, crickets started their evening song. Somewhere in the distance, one of the horses whinnied. Normal sounds. Peaceful sounds. The kind of sounds that had nothing to do with crime syndicates or high tables or arranged marriages. "Thank you," Lucas said suddenly. Allison looked up, surprised. "For what? The terrible beans?" for laughing today, when Bullet stepped on me." He met her eyes across the table. "I can't remember the last time someone laughed at me instead of being afraid." Allison felt something shift in her chest, a softening she absolutely could not afford. "Don't get used to it. Tomorrow you're learning how to fix fence posts, and I guarantee you'll give me plenty more reasons to laugh." "I'm looking forward to it," Lucas said, and the strange thing was, he sounded like he meant it. 3 days into their arrangement, Allison was teaching Lucas how to replace rotted fence posts when the silver Mercedes pulled up the dirt road, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled over everything like a bad omen. She recognized the car immediately. Her hands tightened around the post-hole digger. "Expecting company?" Lucas asked, shading his eyes against the afternoon sun. He'd finally accepted that ranch work required actual work clothes, and today he wore jeans with honest-to-God dirt on them and a white t-shirt that showed off the full sleeve of tattoos on both arms. "Trouble," Allison said simply. "That's Vance." She watched Lucas's entire demeanor shift. The relaxed man who'd been arguing with her about proper fence post depth, disappearing behind the cold mask of someone who'd survived worse than a land developer with delusions of grandeur. "Stay here," Lucas said. "This is my property. I'm not hiding." "I didn't say hide. I said stay here. Let me assess the situation first." But Allison was already walking toward the house, Lucas falling into step beside her. By the time they reached the porch, Vance was climbing out of his Mercedes, his tanned face twisted into what he probably thought was a charming smile. He wore a cream-colored suit that must have been hell in the Texas heat, gold rings on 3 fingers, and the kind of watch that screamed new money and poor taste. "Allison, sweetheart," Vance called out, spreading his arms like they were old friends. "I've been trying to reach you. You haven't been returning my calls." "That's because I don't want to talk to you, Vance. I thought that was pretty clear." His smile faltered, replaced by something uglier. "Now, that's no way to treat someone who's trying to help you. I've got investors interested in this property. Good people with deep pockets who can take this worthless dust bowl and turn it into something special. It's already special. It's mine, and it's not for sale." Vance's eyes finally landed on Lucas, who'd positioned himself slightly behind Allison, observing in silence. "And who's this? You hire some day laborer to play bodyguard?" "Sweetheart, you can't afford protection. That's why you should take my offer before things get unpleasant." "I'm her husband," Lucas said quietly. 2 words, delivered with the weight of a threat. Vance blinked, then laughed. Actually laughed, the sound grating and mean. "Husband? You got married? To this?" He gestured at Lucas dismissively. "What is he? Some drifter you picked up at a bar? Does he even speak English or just grunt?" Allison felt Lucas tense beside her, but he remained still, watching, calculating. She'd learned enough about him in 3 days to recognize that stillness for what it was, a predator deciding whether to strike. "You need to leave," Allison said, keeping her voice level. "I'm not going anywhere until we talk about the reality of your situation." Vance took a step closer, his cologne cutting through the clean air like chemical warfare. "You're 3 months behind on your property taxes. The bank's got your loan flagged for review. And that barn of yours? One good spark and the whole thing goes up. Would be a real shame if something happened to it." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Allison's blood ran cold, but before she could respond, Lucas moved. Not fast, not violent, just a subtle shift that put him between her and Vance. "What did you just say?" Lucas asked, his voice still quiet, still controlled. "I'm just stating facts, friend. Accidents happen all the time on these old properties. Electrical fires, gas leaks, tragic stuff." Vance's smile widened, showing too many teeth. "Of course, if Allison signs the papers I've prepared, I'll make sure she's taken care of. Set her up in a nice apartment in town. She could start fresh, away from all these burdens." "The only burden here," Lucas said, rolling his shoulders like he was working out a kink, "is you." Something in his tone must have finally registered because Vance took a step back. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but I've got connections in this county. The sheriff's office, the planning commission. You threaten me, and you'll regret it." Lucas tilted his head, studying Vance the way someone might study an insect. Then he did something Allison didn't expect. He smiled. Not the warm smile he'd given her over terrible beans, but something cold and sharp and absolutely terrifying. "Connections," Lucas repeated. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then turned it to show Vance. "Is this you? Vance Holloway, developer? The same Vance Holloway who has 3 outstanding lawsuits for fraud?" The one who was banned from doing business in 2 counties for intimidation tactics? Vance's face went pale. How did you... I know a lot of things. Lucas pocketed his phone and took a single step forward. Vance stumbled backward like he'd been shoved. I know you've been threatening my wife for months. I know about the dead animals, the midnight calls, the fake building violations. Another step. I know you owe money to some very unpleasant people in Houston. People who would be very interested to learn where you've been spending your loan payments. You can't prove anything. Vance sputtered, but his voice cracked. I don't need to prove anything. I just need to make a phone call. Lucas pulled his phone out again, finger hovering over the screen. 1 call, and those Houston creditors get your current location. I wonder how long it would take them to drive here. 3 hours? 4? Vance's expensive suit was showing sweat stains now, dark patches spreading under his arms. Who the hell are you? I'm the man who's going to give you exactly 1 chance to walk away. You're going to get in that ridiculous car. You're going to drive away from this property and never come back. You're going to cancel whatever deals you had pending on this land. And you're going to forget Allison Morgan Barnes exists. And if I don't? Lucas's smile widened. Then I stop being polite. He raised his voice slightly, not shouting, just projecting. Dominic? From behind the barn, Dominic emerged. Then 2 more men Allison had never seen before, both built like professional fighters, both wearing expressions that suggested violence was their primary language. You see, Lucas continued conversationally, I've had security watching this property since the wedding, just in case anyone decided to cause trouble. They've been documenting your visits, recording your threats, building quite a file, actually. He glanced at his watch. You have 60 seconds to get off this property before I let them test out their restraint training. Vance looked from Lucas to the security team to Allison, who crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow. All the bluster, all the intimidation, drained out of him like air from a punctured tire. This isn't over. He tried, but it sounded weak. Yes, Lucas said softly. It is. 50 seconds. Vance practically ran to his Mercedes, fumbling with the door handle before throwing himself inside. The engine roared to life, and he reversed so fast he nearly hit the fence post Allison and Lucas had been working on. Gravel sprayed as he gunned it down the dirt road, the silver car disappearing in a cloud of dust. Allison stood frozen on her porch, processing what had just happened. Lucas watched until the car was completely out of sight, then turned to her with concern etched on his face. You okay? You had security watching the property? Since when? Since the wedding. I told you once you signed that paper, you became a target. I wasn't going to leave you unprotected. He glanced toward where Dominic and the others were retreating back to their positions. They're good at staying invisible. And the stuff about his debts? The lawsuits? All true. I had Victoria run a background check the night we met. As soon as you mentioned him, Lucas moved closer, his voice gentler. I wasn't going to let him hurt you, Allison. That was never going to happen. She should be angry about the security she didn't know about, the invasion of privacy, the high-handed way he'd handled the situation. But all she could feel was relief. Sweet, overwhelming relief that Vance was gone. That the nightmare that had been choking her for months had finally ended. Thank you, she said, and meant it. Lucas nodded, then looked down at his dirt-stained clothes with a rueful expression. So, should we finish that fence post? Or are you going to admit that my way of setting it was actually better? Your way was terrible and you know it. It was structurally sound. It was crooked. They walked back to the fence line, arguing about post placement and proper technique, and Allison realized something had shifted between them. The walls were still there, the careful distance they both maintained, but they'd moved a little closer to something that almost felt like partnership. Behind them, hidden in their positions, the security team watched and waited, because the war wasn't over. Silas was still out there, plotting. The high table was still watching. But for the first time in months, Allison felt like she wasn't fighting alone. The heat broke on the 8th night, a cool breeze rolling in from the west that made sitting on the porch actually pleasant for the first time in weeks. Allison had taken to spending the hours after dinner outside, watching the stars appear one by one in the vast Texas sky. Tonight, Lucas had joined her, 2 bottles of beer sweating between them on the weathered porch boards. He'd showered after evening chores, his hair still damp, wearing a simple black t-shirt that made the tattoos on his arms stand out in sharp relief against his skin. In the dim light from the kitchen window, Allison could trace the pattern's intricate designs that wove together into something that looked less like decoration and more like history written in ink. Can I ask you something? Allison said, breaking the comfortable silence they'd fallen into. Lucas took a sip of his beer. You're going to anyway. The dragon on your neck. What does it mean? His hand moved unconsciously to touch the tattoo, fingers tracing the scales that coiled up from his collar. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his beer and turned slightly so she could see it better in the light. It's a mark, he said finally. In the organization, certain tattoos mean certain things. This one means I survived the East Side War. What's the East Side War? Lucas was quiet for so long that Allison thought she'd pushed too far. Then he started talking, his voice low and distant, like he was describing something that had happened to someone else. 12 years ago, I was nobody, just another kid running numbers for whichever crew would take me. The city was carved up between 3 families, and everyone knew the rules. Stay in your territory, don't touch another family's business, keep the peace. He paused, taking another drink. Then someone decided peace was bad for profits. Allison waited, watching the way his jaw clenched. They called it a war, but it was a slaughter. 3 months of violence that left bodies in the street and families destroyed. I was 23, stupid enough to think I could make a difference, young enough to believe in loyalty. His laugh was bitter. I watched my crew get picked off one by one. My mentor got shot in front of me. My best friend disappeared. We found him 3 weeks later in the river. Lucas. The dragon is for the survivors. There were 15 of us left when it ended. 15 out of 67. He touched the tattoo again. We got marked so we'd never forget what war costs. So we'd never be stupid enough to start one ourselves. Allison felt something tighten in her chest. She'd known he was dangerous. Known he'd done things she probably couldn't imagine. But hearing him talk about it made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Is that why you didn't want to fight, Silas? She asked quietly. Why you chose the marriage route instead of just handling him? I've had enough war for one lifetime. And the thing about war is, it doesn't care who's right. It just eats everyone. He met her eyes. Silas thinks violence is power. He's wrong. Violence is just destruction wearing a crown. They sat in silence for a while. The crickets singing their evening song. Allison picked at the label on her beer bottle, feeling the weight of his story settling over them like a blanket. My parents died 2 years ago, she said suddenly. The words came out before she'd consciously decided to share them. Truck accident on Route 77. They were coming back from the farmer's market in Austin. Dad was probably driving too fast like he always did, and Mom was probably telling him to slow down like she always did. Lucas turned to look at her, his expression careful. The cops said it was quick, that they wouldn't have felt anything. People keep saying that, like it's supposed to make it better. Allison laughed, but it came out broken. I was at college when I got the call. Just finished my sophomore year, had this whole plan to come back and help them expand the ranch, maybe start a breeding program for the horses. You dropped out, Lucas said. Not a question. Came home for the funeral and never left. Someone had to keep the place running, and I was all they had. She stared out at the dark shapes of the barn and the stables, the land her great-grandfather had claimed and her parents had loved. Everyone told me to sell. My advisor, my friends, the bank manager. They said I was too young, that ranching was dying anyway, that I should take the money and finish my degree. But you stayed. This place is all I have left of them. Every fence post Dad repaired, every horse Mom trained, the garden she planted that I can't keep alive no matter how hard I try. Allison's voice cracked. Selling it would be like saying they didn't matter. Like their whole lives building this place meant nothing. Lucas reached over and took her hand. Just held it, his palm warm and calloused against hers. He didn't offer platitudes or try to fix anything. He just sat with her in the grief. After the war, he said eventually, I couldn't sleep for 2 years. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. The ones who didn't make it. I kept thinking about all the things I could have done differently. The warnings I missed. The choices that got them killed. How did you stop? I didn't. I just learned to live with it. He squeezed her hand gently. The ghosts don't go away, Allison. You just get better at carrying them. She looked down at their joined hands, at the tattoos that disappeared under his sleeve, at the scars she could see on his knuckles. This man who'd built an empire on violence but chose peace, who'd survived a war and wore the proof on his skin, who understood loss in a way most people never would. Do you regret it? She asked. The life you chose? Every day. His honesty was stark, unvarnished. But regret doesn't change anything. You can only move forward. Is that what this is? Moving forward? Lucas turned to face her fully, his blue eyes searching hers in the darkness. I came here because I needed a wife to satisfy a requirement. A business transaction, nothing more. He paused, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. But somewhere between your terrible beans and watching you laugh at me getting stepped on by a horse, it stopped being just business. Allison's heart kicked against her ribs. Lucas, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know this wasn't what you signed up for. I know I'm temporary. But I need you to know that when Vance threatened you, when Silas tried to intimidate you, when any of this became about protecting you instead of protecting my territory, that's when everything changed. She should pull her hand away. Should remind him this was fake, temporary, a means to an end for both of them. Instead, she held on tighter. My parents had this saying, Allison said softly. They used to tell me that the best things in life come from the worst circumstances, that sometimes you have to break completely before you can build something real. Sounds wise. I thought it was garbage. Optimistic nonsense they told themselves to feel better about scraping by on a failing ranch. She looked at him. This dangerous man who'd invaded her life and somehow made it better. But maybe they were onto something. Lucas lifted her hand and pressed it briefly to his forehead, a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. Your parents sound like they were good people. The best. Allison's voice was thick with emotion. They would have liked you. Dad would have given you hell about the expensive suits. But Mom would have appreciated that you're trying, that you're learning. Even though I'm terrible at it? Especially because you're terrible at it. She always said effort counted more than talent. They sat like that for a long time, hands joined, sharing the weight of their ghosts. The temperature dropped another degree, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to the moon. Lucas's thumb traced absent patterns on her wrist, and Allison felt something in her chest crack open, letting in light for the first time in 2 years. Thank you, Lucas said eventually. For what? For asking about the tattoo, for trusting me with your story. He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the same cautious hope she felt blooming in her own chest. For not running when you found out who I really am. I'm a rancher, Lucas. We don't run from things that scare us. We just learn to work with them. His laugh was soft and genuine. Is that what I am? Something that scares you? Terrifies me, Allison admitted. But not because of the crime syndicate or the violence or any of that. Then why? She looked at their joined hands, at the way they fit together despite everything that should have kept them apart. Because this feels real, and real things can hurt you worse than any threat. Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, soft and reverent. Then I guess we're both terrified. They stayed on the porch until the moon rose high, and the beer bottles went warm. And when they finally went inside, neither of them mentioned that Lucas paused at her bedroom door, or that Allison almost asked him to stay. The diner sat on the edge of town like a relic from another era, all chrome and red vinyl and a neon sign that buzzed rosies, in letters that had been flickering since before Allison was born. It was Friday night, 2 weeks into the marriage, and Lucas had suggested they get out of the house for dinner. Actual dinner, he'd specified, not canned beans or the questionable casserole Allison had attempted the night before. She'd agreed, partially because the casserole really had been questionable, but mostly because the way Lucas had asked, hesitant, almost shy, had made something warm bloom in her chest. Now they sat across from each other in a corner booth, the smell of frying onions and coffee thick in the air. Lucas had abandoned his suits entirely, wearing jeans and a dark blue Henley that made his eyes look almost gray. His hair was slightly messy from the wind on the drive over, and there was a smudge of grease on his jaw from helping her fix the tractor that afternoon. He looked nothing like the dangerous crime boss who'd shown up on her porch 2 weeks ago. He looked like someone she could build a life with. That thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt inevitable. You've got something on your face, Allison said, reaching across the table with her napkin. Lucas caught her wrist gently, his thumb finding her pulse point. Where? Right. She touched his jaw with her free hand, wiping away the grease. Their faces were close now. Close enough that she could see the lighter flecks in his blue eyes, could count the faint scars on his face that told stories he'd probably never share. Allison, he said, his voice rough. Yeah? I think I'm... His phone buzzed on the table between them, shattering the moment. Lucas glanced at it, and Allison watched his entire expression change. The warmth drained away, replaced by something cold and alert. What is it? She asked. Dominic. He says we need to leave. Now. Lucas was already pulling cash from his wallet, throwing bills on the table without counting them. Don't turn around, but there's a black sedan parked across the street. 2 men inside. They've been watching us since we arrived. Allison's blood went cold. Are you sure? I've been doing this long enough to know when I'm being watched. He stood, offering her his hand with a calmness that felt forced. "We're going to walk out of here like nothing's wrong. Get in the truck. Drive normally until I say otherwise. Lucas, trust me." She took his hand and let him lead her through the diner. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to match his casual pace. Smile at the waitress. Wave to Mrs. Henderson from church. Act normal while her heart tried to hammer its way out of her chest. The night air hit her face like a slap. Lucas's truck was parked 3 spots down, and the black sedan across the street was exactly where he'd said it would be. She could see the shapes of 2 men inside, both watching them with the kind of focus that made her skin crawl. They climbed into the truck. Lucas started the engine with hands that were perfectly steady. "Seatbelt," he said quietly. Allison clicked it into place, her own hands shaking. "What do we do?" "We drive home. Stay calm. They're just watching for now." But even as he said it, another vehicle pulled into the street behind them. Another sedan, just as dark, just as ominous. Or maybe not. Lucas pulled out of the parking lot at a normal speed, turning left toward the ranch. In the rearview mirror, both sedans followed. Not close, but not hiding either. They wanted to be seen. "Call Dominic," Lucas said, his voice tight. "Tell him we've got a tail. 2 vehicles. Tell him to get to the ranch now." Allison fumbled for Lucas's phone, her fingers clumsy with adrenaline. Dominic answered on the first ring. "Boss? It's Allison. Lucas says we have a tail. 2 vehicles. He said to tell you to get to the ranch. We're already on our way. 10 minutes out." Dominic's voice was crisp, professional. "Keep him on the line. Don't hang up." The ranch road stretched out ahead of them, dark and empty. Lucas pushed the truck faster, the engine growling. Behind them, the sedans matched their speed. "They're not trying to hide anymore," Allison said. "No, they're not." Lucas's jaw was set, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "This is Silas. It has to be. He must have found out about the ranch, about us living there. Why now? We've been here 2 weeks. Because he finally has proof." Lucas took a curve too fast, tires squealing. "He's been building a case to the high table that I've abandoned my position, that I've gone soft. Living on a failing ranch in the middle of nowhere, that's all the evidence he needs. So what does he want?" Lucas's expression was grim. "To finish what he started. If he can take me out and make it look justified, the high table might let him claim my territory. No war, no mess, just a clean transfer of power." The ranch gate appeared in the headlights. Lucas didn't slow down, crashing through it hard enough to send the gate swinging. Behind them, the sedans accelerated. "Hold on," Lucas said. The truck fishtailed up the dirt road, throwing gravel. Allison braced herself against the door, watching the headlights behind them grow closer. They were a 1/4 mile from the house when the first gunshot cracked through the night. "Get down!" Lucas shouted, even as he kept driving. Allison ducked, her heart in her throat. Another shot, this one taking out the back window in an explosion of glass. Lucas cursed, swerving hard. "Dominic, they're shooting," Allison said into the phone, her voice surprisingly steady. 2 minutes. Just 2 more minutes. The house came into view, every light blazing. Lucas skidded to a stop in front of the porch, already reaching for Allison. "Inside. Now. Lock the doors, get the rifle, and do not come out until I tell you. I'm not leaving you. Allison." He grabbed her face in both hands, his eyes fierce. She wanted to argue, wanted to stay and fight beside him, but the sound of engines getting closer made the decision for her. She kissed him, hard and desperate, then ran for the house. Inside, she grabbed her father's rifle from above the door and took position at the window. Outside, Lucas stood in the driveway, illuminated by the truck's headlights, as 2 sedans rolled to a stop 20 feet away. 4 men got out, all armed, all wearing expressions that said they'd come here to end this. From the lead sedan, a 5th man emerged. Even from this distance, Allison recognized him from the video call. Silas. His blonde hair caught the light as he smiled, cold and triumphant. "Lucas Barnes," Silas called out. "Living in a farmhouse, working with your hands, playing house with some desperate rancher." He laughed, the sound carrying across the dusty yard. "The high table is going to love this." The great Lucas Barnes, brought low by a woman and a piece of dirt. Lucas didn't move, didn't respond, just stood there, waiting. "I'm giving you a choice," Silas continued. "Come back, resume your position, annul this pathetic marriage and admit it was all a desperate ploy." He paused. "Or we end this right here, right now. Your territory becomes mine, and your little wife becomes collateral damage." Allison's hands tightened on the rifle. Through the scope, she could see Lucas's face. She could see the moment he made his decision. "No," Lucas said, his voice carrying clear across the distance. "I'm done with your world, Silas. Find another throne to steal." Silas's smile widened. Wrong answer. He raised his hand, and all 4 men lifted their weapons. In the distance, Allison heard the sound of approaching engines. Dominic and the security team, racing to reach them. But they were still too far away. Everything happened at once. The first shot rang out. Lucas dove behind the truck. Allison pulled the trigger, taking out the front tire of the nearest sedan. And the peaceful ranch she'd fought so hard to protect became a war zone. The world exploded into chaos and gunfire. Allison squeezed off another shot, her father's rifle bucking against her shoulder as she took out the headlight on Silas's sedan. Glass shattered, plunging half the yard into darkness. Outside, Lucas rolled behind the truck bed, using it as cover while bullets punched holes through the metal. She'd grown up hunting deer in these fields, learned to shoot before she learned to drive. But shooting at paper targets and animals was nothing compared to aiming at men who were trying to kill the person she loved. The realization hit her harder than the rifle's recoil. She loved him. Somewhere between the terrible beans and the late-night conversations and watching him fumble with fence posts, she'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with Lucas Barnes. And she'd be damned if Silas was going to take him from her. 2 of Silas's men split off, circling toward the barn. Lucas saw them move and sprinted from behind the truck, staying low. He didn't have a gun, Allison realized with mounting horror. He'd left everything behind when they'd gone to dinner, believing this was supposed to be a normal night. "Lucas!" she screamed, but her warning was swallowed by gunfire. One of the men raised his weapon, finger on the trigger. Allison didn't think. She aimed and fired, hitting him in the shoulder. He went down hard, his gun skittering across the gravel. Lucas was on him in seconds, a brutal punch that sent the man into unconsciousness. The second attacker came at Lucas from the side, and they collided in a tangle of fists and violence. Lucas fought like someone who'd learned in alleys and back rooms, all efficiency and brutal precision. He dodged a wild swing and delivered a devastating combination that dropped his opponent to his knees. But Silas still had 2 more men, and they were advancing on the house. Allison chambered another round, her hands surprisingly steady. She hit the porch light above the door, plunging the entrance into darkness. One of the men hesitated, confused by the sudden blackness, and she used the moment to put a bullet into the dirt at his feet. A warning. He didn't take it. Neither did his partner. They rushed the porch together. Allison abandoned the window and pressed herself against the wall beside the door, rifle ready. The first man through ate the stock of her rifle across his face. He went down hard, blood streaming from his broken nose. The second man was smarter. He grabbed the barrel, trying to wrench it from her hands. They struggled, crashing into her mother's china cabinet. Plates shattered. Allison drove her knee up hard, connecting with soft tissue. The man grunted, his grip loosening just enough for her to rip the rifle free and slam the butt into his temple. He crumpled. Her hands were shaking now. 2 men, unconscious in her kitchen, blood on her grandmother's floor, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. This was her home, the place her parents had built, and these men had brought violence here like it meant nothing. She grabbed the dropped pistol from the first man and ran back to the window. Outside, Lucas had taken down all 4 attackers, but he was bleeding from a cut above his eye, favoring his left side. Silas stood alone now, his own gun drawn, looking at the carnage of his failed hit squad with something like disbelief. Then his eyes lifted to the house, to the window where Allison stood, and he smiled. "Touching," Silas called out, his voice carrying over the sudden silence. The little rancher defending her criminal husband. How romantic. He started walking toward the house, gun loose at his side. "But you've just made this so much easier, Lucas. The high table loves a good love story. They'll understand why I had to eliminate both of you. Tragic, really. A murder-suicide. The desperate criminal and his poor wife, caught in a cycle of violence." Lucas moved to intercept him, but Silas raised his gun, aiming directly at the house. At her. Another step, and I put a bullet through that window. Wonder if I'll hit her on the first try, or if I'll need a few practice shots. Lucas froze. Allison could see the calculation in his eyes, the desperate search for an option that didn't end with her dead. But they both knew Silas had the advantage now. He was too far from Lucas, too close to the house, and his gun was already aimed. "That's better," Silas said. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over your territory to me. You're going to tell the high table this marriage was a sham, and that you're stepping down voluntarily. and then you're going to disappear. Maybe I'll even let you take the girl. And if I refuse? Lucas's voice was steady, but Allison could hear the edge of fear beneath it. Then I kill her while you watch. And after you've had time to really feel that loss, I'll kill you too. Silas's smile widened. Choose quickly, Lucas. My trigger finger's getting tired. The distant sound of engines was getting louder. Dominic and the security team, close now but not close enough. 30 seconds, maybe less. But 30 seconds was an eternity when a gun was pointed at someone you loved. Allison saw Lucas's shoulders sag. Saw the moment he made his decision. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, the one with all his contacts, all his business, the entire empire at his fingertips. Don't, Allison said, loud enough for both men to hear. Lucas, don't you dare. I have to. His eyes met hers through the window, and she saw everything he couldn't say written in that gaze. I love you. I'm sorry. I choose you. Your life is worth more than all of this. How sweet, Silas sneered. The big bad crime boss, brought to his knees by a... He didn't finish the sentence. Allison had moved to the door, the pistol she'd taken from the unconscious attacker held steady in both hands. She stepped onto the porch, every inch of her shaking with fury and fear and love. Put the gun down, Silas. He laughed. Actually laughed. Or what? You'll shoot me? You don't have the guts, sweetheart. You're a rancher playing dress-up in a world you don't understand. You're right, Allison said, her voice surprisingly calm. I don't understand your world. I don't understand how you can look at what Lucas and I have built and only see power to steal. I don't understand how you can threaten to destroy something real just to satisfy your greed. She took another step onto the porch, gun still aimed at his chest. But I understand this. You're not taking him from me. You're not taking my home. And you're sure as hell not taking another thing that I love. Silas's expression shifted, uncertainty creeping in. You're bluffing. Try me. For a moment, everything hung in balance. Silas with his gun aimed at the house, Allison with hers aimed at him. Lucas standing helpless between them, watching the two most important things in his life hang by a thread. Then headlights flooded the property. 3 SUVs roared up the drive, and Dominic and 6 heavily armed men poured out, weapons trained on Silas. Drop it, Dominic commanded. Now. Silas looked around, seeing his unconscious men, the destroyed sedans, the ring of weapons pointed at him. His face twisted with rage, and something worse, humiliation. He'd come here to prove Lucas had gone soft, and instead he'd proven that Lucas had found something worth fighting for. This isn't over, Silas spat. Yes, Lucas said quietly, walking toward Allison. It is. Silas made one last desperate move. He swung his gun toward Allison, finger tightening on the trigger, but Lucas was faster. He threw himself in front of her just as the shot rang out. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Allison screamed, catching him as he fell. Dominic's team opened fire, and Silas went down hard, his gun clattering across the porch. Lucas! Allison pressed her hands to his shoulder, feeling blood seep hot between her fingers. Stay with me. Please stay with me. His eyes found hers, pain-glazed but aware. Are you hurt? No, you idiot, but you are. Tears streamed down her face. Why would you do that? Because I love you, he said simply. Empire, territory, power, none of it matters if you're not there. Dominic was already on the phone calling for an ambulance. The security team secured Silas and his men. But Allison heard none of it. She knelt there in the blood and broken glass, holding the man who'd chosen her over everything he'd built, and felt her heart break and heal all at once. Don't you dare die on me, she whispered fiercely. We still have fence posts to fix and horses to feed, and a whole lifetime of terrible dinners ahead of us. Lucas smiled, weak but real. Is that a proposal, Mrs. Barnes? We're already married, you idiot. I know, but this time I'm asking you to mean it. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Allison pressed her forehead to his, careful of his wounds, and made a promise that had nothing to do with contracts or high tables or arranged marriages. I already do. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and bad coffee, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead in a rhythm that had driven Allison half crazy over the past 6 hours. Lucas lay in the bed, his shoulder bandaged and his arm in a sling, looking pale but alive. The doctor had said he was lucky the bullet had missed anything vital, passing clean through muscle. 6 weeks of recovery, physical therapy, and he'd be fine. Allison hadn't left his side since the ambulance had brought them in. She'd sat through the surgery, paced the waiting room, and fielded phone calls from Dominic with updates she barely processed. All that mattered was that Lucas was breathing, that his heart was still beating, that he'd opened his eyes and looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. Now, as dawnlight started creeping through the hospital window, Lucas reached for her hand with his good arm. "You should sleep," he said, his voice still rough from the anesthesia. "I'm fine. You're exhausted. There are bags under your eyes and you're wearing a shirt with my blood on it." Allison looked down at herself. He was right. Her white blouse was ruined, stained rust brown across the front. She should have changed hours ago, should have gone home to shower and rest, but the thought of leaving him alone had been unbearable. "I'll sleep when you do," she said. "Stubborn woman. You married me knowing exactly how stubborn I was." Something shifted in Lucas's expression. He squeezed her hand gently, then pulled her closer until she was sitting on the edge of his bed. About that, the marriage, the contract. Allison's stomach dropped. Here it was. The moment he told her it was over, that he'd fulfilled his obligation to the high table and didn't need her anymore, that he was going back to his penthouse and his suits and his empire, leaving her and the ranch behind like a strange dream he'd once had. "Lucas, the deal is off," he said. The words hit her like a physical blow. She tried to pull her hand back, but he held on tighter. "Wait, let me finish." He took a breath, wincing slightly from the pain in his shoulder. The deal was marriage for money, protection for stability, a transaction with clear terms and an expiration date. His blue eyes searched hers. "But somewhere between you, laughing at me, getting stepped on by a horse, and tonight when I thought Silas might actually kill you, it stopped being a deal." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want to be married to you because of a contract or a high table requirement, or because we both needed something from each other." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles softly. "I want to be married to you because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Because you make terrible casseroles and give me hell about everything and look at me like I'm more than just the violence I've done." Allison felt tears prick her eyes. "You took a bullet for me. I'd take 100 more. 1,000. His voice was fierce despite his injuries. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. The empire, the territory, all of it, I'm done. I'm stepping down. Giving it to someone who actually wants it. Someone who won't use it to hurt people. Lucas, you can't just walk away from—" "Watch me." He smiled, and it was the most genuine expression she'd ever seen on his face. "I've spent 12 years building something I never wanted. Something I only took because I survived when better men didn't. But you, this ranch, the life we've started building together, that's what I want. That's what I choose." "What about the high table?" "I called Constance from the ambulance, told her I was retiring, effective immediately, that I was recommending Dominic as my successor, and that if they had a problem with it, they could take it up with my wife." He laughed softly. She actually sounded pleased. Said it was about time someone in this business chose love over power. Allison didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You're serious. You're actually going to stay here and be a rancher." "I'm going to be terrible at it," Lucas admitted. "I'll probably kill all your plants and get stepped on by horses regularly and burn every meal I try to cook. But I'll wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. And that's worth more than any empire. You're going to get bored. 6 months from now, you'll miss the excitement and the power and—" He kissed her, cutting off her protests with his lips. It was soft and deep and tasted like the beginning of something real. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "I've had enough excitement for one lifetime. What I want now is boring, mundane. I want to argue with you about fence posts and fix tractors and learn how to make something grow instead of watching things burn." His hand cupped her face. "I want you, Allison, not because I need you, but because I love you." "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and inevitable. "Even though you're probably going to be the worst rancher in Texas history." "Probably." He grinned. "Good thing I married someone who can teach me." They sat like that as the sun fully rose, painting the hospital room in shades of gold. Outside, Allison could hear the sounds of the hospital coming to life. Nurses making rounds, visitors arriving, life continuing despite everything that had happened in the dark hours of the night. A knock on the door interrupted them. Dominic stepped in, looking exhausted but satisfied. "Boss, Mrs. Barnes." "Just Lucas now," Lucas corrected. "The boss title is yours if you want it." Dominic blinked, surprised. "You're serious about stepping down?" "Dead serious. The high table approved it. The territory is yours, along with all the headaches that come with it. Lucas squeezed Allison's hand. I've got a new job now, one that actually matters. Professional fence post installer? Allison suggested. Something like that. Dominic shook his head, but he was smiling. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. I've never seen you look as alive as you did these past 2 weeks. He glanced at Allison. She's good for you. She's everything, Lucas said simply. What about Silas? Allison asked. In custody. The high table is handling it personally. He violated about a dozen protocols attacking you two, and they don't take kindly to that kind of chaos. Dominic's expression hardened. He won't be a problem anymore. I'll make sure of it. And the ranch? Is it safe? I've got a team cleaning up now. The damage is mostly cosmetic bullet holes, broken windows, some torn up gravel. Nothing that can't be fixed. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Also, this came through this morning. Vance's development company filed for bankruptcy. Something about his investors suddenly pulling out. Very mysterious. Lucas's smile was sharp. How unfortunate for him. After Dominic left, a nurse came in to check Lucas's vitals and inform them he'd be released that afternoon if there were no complications. Allison finally agreed to go home and change, but only because Lucas promised not to die while she was gone. When she returned 2 hours later, showered and in clean clothes, she found the room transformed. Someone, probably Dominic, had brought fresh flowers, real coffee, and Lucas's phone, which was buzzing constantly with messages she knew he'd ignore. Ready to go home? She asked. Lucas looked at her, and the word home hung between them with new meaning. Not his penthouse in the city. Not some temporary arrangement. Home. The ranch with its broken fences and stubborn horses, and the porch where they'd shared their scars and their stories. More than ready. The drive back was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they pulled up to the ranch, Allison's breath caught. The security team had been thorough, the yard was clean, the broken windows already boarded up, the blood washed away. You'd never know a war had been fought here just hours ago. But Lucas's 3 expensive suitcases sat on the porch, packed and waiting. Allison's heart sank. Lucas, open them, he said. She did. They were empty. Every suit, every expensive shirt, every reminder of his old life gone. I had Dominic donate it all, Lucas explained, walking up behind her. Figured I should start fresh, though I might need help shopping for ranch clothes. I have no idea what I'm doing. Allison turned to face him. This man who'd given up everything for a chance at something real. The sun was fully up now, warming the land her parents had loved, the home they'd built. In the distance, she could hear the horses whinnying, calling for their breakfast. We should feed them, she said. In a minute. Lucas pulled her close with his good arm, careful of his injured shoulder. First, I need to ask you something. You already asked me to marry you. Twice, technically. Not that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, not the cheap band from the 24-hour chapel, but something beautiful and simple. A single diamond set in a gold band that looked like it had been made specifically for her hand. Allison Morgan Barnes, he said, his voice steady and sure. I know we did this all backward. The marriage before the courtship, the contract before the love, the violence before the peace. But I'm asking you now. With no deals and no high table and no desperation, just me and you and a future we get to build together. Will you stay married to me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life learning to be the man you deserve? She looked at the ring, at his face, at the ranch spreading out behind him in the morning light, at all the possibilities and second chances and new beginnings waiting for them. On one condition, she said. Anything. You let me teach you how to make a proper meal. Because I swear if I have to eat canned beans one more time, I'm filing for divorce. Lucas laughed, bright and free, and completely unguarded. He slipped the ring onto her finger, it fit perfectly, and kissed her as the last of the security SUVs pulled away, leaving them finally, blissfully alone. Deal, he whispered against her lips. Though I should warn you, I'm probably going to be terrible at cooking too. You're terrible at everything ranch-related, but you're mine, and that's all that matters. They stood on the porch as the sun climbed higher, 2 broken people who'd found wholeness in each other. The empire was gone, the danger had passed, and all that remained was the simple promise of tomorrow. Lucas Barnes, former crime boss, had finally found something worth more than power. He'd found home,